Outside, it was one of the loudest nights in Dubai. Hundreds of thousands of tourists and residents packed the streets. They created a surge of human traffic that tested the local infrastructure to its absolute limit. Down on the pavement, the pressure of mass tourism was physical, overwhelming, and completely inescapable. But inside a specific apartment, hundreds of meters above the chaos, a family stood by their window and watched the entire spectacle unfold. They saw the fireworks ignite the sky. They saw the massive crowds surging against the security barricades. They saw the flashing lights of emergency vehicles navigating the gridlock. And yet, as resident Salim Moopen later described the experience of watching the New Year celebration from his home, he noted one defining detail. He said that they did not hear a single sound. He meant it as a profound observation of comfort. But praise can sometimes reveal a consequence the speaker never actually intended. What happens when you can see an entire city, but the city can no longer reach you? This video is not about the incredible height of the Burj Khalifa. It is not about the cost of its real estate or the engineering required to keep it standing. It is an investigation into an architectural paradox. We will listen to the people who live here. We will observe their daily routines. We will examine what happens to urban life when a building provides so much comfort that the world outside becomes entirely optional. One resident described the tower with a sentence that sounds like the perfect advertisement. But it might also be the most revealing warning about what luxury actually does to human connection. Most people assume that isolation begins when a place lacks resources. We imagine isolation as an empty room. We picture a remote cabin or a neighborhood with no stores, no services, and no people. But inside the Burj Khalifa, the exact opposite mechanism seems to be at work. Here, a resident famously stated that you never have to leave the tower if you do not want to. He meant this as the ultimate compliment to the building's visionary design. But consider what that actually means for the experience of living in a society. In a normal neighborhood, you are forced to interact with the world simply to survive your daily routine. You walk down the street to buy groceries. You stand in line at the local coffee shop. You pass your neighbors on the sidewalk. You wait for a delivery driver at your front door. You react to the sudden heat of the sun or a sudden change in the wind. These are all minor inconveniences. But these inconveniences are exactly what force you to cross paths with other human beings. When a building turns every daily necessity into an internal, seamless service, the unplanned encounters that accompany those necessities begin to vanish. You do not need to walk to a neighborhood gym because there is a state-of-the-art facility inside. You do not need to find a public park because there are private lounges on the 43rd, 76th, and 123rd floors. You do not need to step into the humid, crowded streets of downtown Dubai to find a convenience store. You can even access the world's largest shopping mall through a direct, climate-controlled walkway. The building has successfully cured the friction of urban living. Personally, I do not think the rarest luxury here is the view from the window. It is the ability to remove almost every unplanned interruption from your day. If everything you need is contained inside one vertical address, does your life become larger? Or does it simply become more efficient? Convenience can remove your need to leave the building, but security determines who is allowed to enter it. We have to acknowledge a practical reality about the people who buy real estate in the tallest building on earth. Many of them are individuals with significant wealth, high public profiles, or specific security needs. Security is a highly rational requirement for them. Privacy is a privilege they have paid heavily to secure. No resident has an obligation to live their life as a public figure. Nobody is required to leave their door open to strangers. Having a professional concierge filter your guests is an undeniable benefit. But when everyone entering your world has been selected and approved in advance, what disappears, along with the unwanted visitor? To understand this, we have to look at the daily journey of a resident leaving their apartment. Imagine tracking a resident from their front door to the street and counting their interactions. How many people do they see? How many people do they actually greet? How many of those people are service staff? And how many are actual neighbors? Are there any spontaneous conversations that last longer than a brief professional nod? Does the resident know the names of the people they pass in the hallway? In a traditional neighborhood, you cannot control who walks down your street. You might run into a friend, but you are just as likely to run into a stranger asking for directions, a local vendor, or a neighbor you have never spoken to before. This lack of control is the defining characteristic of public life. Inside a hyper-secure environment, that unpredictability is engineered out of existence. A visitor must be registered. They must present identification at the lobby. They must be cleared by security teams. They must be directed to the correct elevator bank. They are transported directly to the specific floor they are allowed to visit, and absolutely nowhere else. The system is flawless at protecting the resident from the chaos of the city. But it also means that almost every human interaction inside the residential floors is either a scheduled appointment or a transactional exchange with a staff member. The tower does not only filter out dangerous people, sometimes it appears to filter out the city itself, and the separation from the city is not just social, it is profoundly physical. Let us return to that spectacular New Year celebration. Outside, Dubai was executing one of its most critical economic functions. The city relies on more than 17 million international tourists every year. Massive global events are essential to keeping hotels full, restaurants busy, and the aviation sector growing. During peak season, hotel occupancy frequently pushes past 80%, placing massive demand on local services. The pressure on the ground during these events is immense. Crowds push against each other in the humidity. Car horns echo through the concrete canyons. People shout over the noise of the music and the heavy traffic. Tourists hold up their phones, their faces illuminated by the screens, sweating in the evening heat. It is a vibrant, overwhelming, and exhausting environment. But inside the apartment, separated by layers of specialized, heavy-duty architectural glass, the resident experiences none of this friction. The fireworks explode in a magnificent display of color. The city glows with millions of lights, stretching all the way to the ocean, but the room remains perfectly quiet. The temperature remains perfectly stable. The resident is not pushed, crowded, or inconvenienced by the tourism machine operating just hundreds of meters below. This is luxury in its purest form. It is the ability to watch chaos without being touched by it. You can see everything, but seeing a city is not the same as sharing its experience. When you are entirely removed from the sounds, the smells, and the physical presence of a crowd, the city below you undergoes a subtle transformation. The people become tiny dots. The traffic jams look like slow-moving rivers of light. The overwhelming pressure of urban density is reduced to an aesthetic pattern. The crowd becomes decoration. The chaos becomes a private view. The architectural achievement required to make this possible is extraordinary. It is a triumph of engineering to build a glass wall that can hold back the roar of a metropolis. But it also reveals how completely a dynamic, living city can be transformed into a silent, two-dimensional image on a screen. Would you rather experience the messy, loud, and unpredictable celebration of human gathering, or would you prefer to possess the best possible view of it, locked inside a silent room? The glass does not only hold back the noise of the city. One resident described something else she could see, but could not simply let inside. Tabinda Sanpal, reflecting on her family's time living in the tower, pointed out a very specific reality of their apartment. She noted that the only thing they were missing out on was the fresh air. This is not a failure of the building's ventilation system. The tower has highly advanced air conditioning and filtration systems designed to keep the interior environment safe and comfortable. At extreme altitudes, the wind pressure and temperature variations make opening a standard window highly impractical, if not entirely dangerous. But this practical engineering constraint creates a fascinating psychological paradox. From a high floor, a resident can see a vast expanse of the earth. They can watch a sandstorm gather in the distant desert. They can see rain clouds moving across the water. They can see the shadows of the clouds passing over the skyscrapers below. They can observe the weather patterns of an entire region. Yet, their physical contact with that environment is entirely mediated by technology. The light they see has been filtered through treated glass. The air they breathe has been processed, cooled, and circulated by a massive mechanical system. The temperature they feel is controlled by a digital thermostat, completely disconnected from the burning summer heat or the cool winter breeze outside. You can see the weather without necessarily touching it. This is where the view begins to feel slightly strange. You possess the widest perspective on the planet. You can see the desert, the sea, and the city all at once. But you cannot simply lean outside and feel the wind against your face. You cannot open a window to let in the smell of the rain hitting the hot pavement. Your environment is totally synthetic, completely protected from the harsh realities of the regional climate. Which home gives you more control? The extraordinary apartment in the sky, with a permanently sealed view, or the ordinary room on the ground, with a window you can actually open, but a sealed apartment does not automatically mean a disconnected life. The Burj Khalifa was not designed to be a collection of isolated cells. It has communal spaces built directly into the sky. The question is what actually happens inside them. It would be entirely unfair and factually incorrect to claim that the Burj Khalifa lacks spaces for social interaction. The architects deliberately designed sky lobbies on the 43rd, 76th, and 123rd floors. These areas feature swimming pools, jacuzzis, fitness centers, and beautifully appointed recreation rooms. They were built with the clear intention of bringing people together. For some residents, these spaces genuinely work. People can and do meet their neighbors while running on the treadmills or relaxing by the indoor pools. Some residents likely form strong, lasting friendships within the building, hosting private gatherings and enjoying a shared sense of exclusivity. But we have to ask a deeper question about the nature of these spaces. Do these spectacular rooms behave like real neighborhoods, or do they function more like luxury waiting rooms? If you spend time observing high-end residential amenities, a pattern often emerges. The lounges are impeccably clean, beautifully lit, and often very quiet. People tend to arrive alone or in pre-arranged private groups. Many sit looking at their phones, absorbed in their own digital worlds. The furniture is often arranged for aesthetic appeal, rather than forcing strangers to face one another. Residents move through these spaces efficiently, utilizing the service, and then returning to their private quarters. There is rarely the messy, overlapping, unstructured activity that defines a real community. If you were to ask residents a few simple questions, the answers might be revealing. How many people on your floor do you know by name? When was the last time you had an unplanned conversation with a neighbor that lasted more than 30 seconds? Do the shared facilities feel like a community, or do they simply feel like a premium service? A swimming pool is an amenity. A beautifully decorated lounge is a real estate asset. But a neighborhood is a pattern of repeated, unscripted human contact. It is the collective responsibility over a shared space. It is noticing when someone is absent. Residents may still have incredibly rich social lives, filled with friends, family, and business associates. But there is a difference between maintaining a private network of selected relationships and participating in a public life created by the city around you. To understand what might be lost in this environment, we must look at how a healthy urban ecosystem actually functions. A vibrant city is a machine that generates social accidents. It is the vendor who remembers your regular order. It is two strangers sharing an umbrella while waiting for a pedestrian crossing. It is someone holding an elevator door for you when your hands are full. It is children inventing a game on a public sidewalk. It is a conversation that only starts because the train is delayed or the weather suddenly turns bad. A city forces people who did not choose each other to occupy the same space and negotiate their existence together. But in a hyper-luxury ecosystem, these social accidents are systematically eliminated. Many of the roles traditionally played by the public are replaced by paid professionals. Instead of asking a stranger for help, you ask the concierge. Instead of walking through a crowded market, a delivery driver brings the goods directly to your service elevator. Instead of encountering unexpected visitors, security ensures you only see the people you have explicitly invited. This dynamic becomes even more significant when we consider the broader economic pressures on Dubai. The city is aggressively expanding its tourism sector, bringing in millions of temporary visitors. This creates intense pressure on the ground. Malls are crowded, roads are heavily congested, and public spaces are heavily commercialized. Real estate prices have surged as international wealth seeks a safe haven, pushing the cost of living higher. For those who can afford it, retreating into a highly controlled, private vertical environment makes logical sense. It is a way to escape the very tourism machine that powers the city's economy. Luxury does not necessarily remove human connection. It simply replaces public connection with private connection. A resident is not necessarily lonely. They are simply insulated. They still have their families, their chosen friends, and their professional networks. What vanishes is the friction of the uninvited world. Would you rather know exactly who can enter your world every single day? Or would you prefer to live somewhere where the world occasionally enters without asking for permission? One quiet corridor is not proof of isolation. But when the quiet corridor, the sealed glass, the strict security, and the internal services are placed together, they begin to form something larger. None of the evidence we have examined proves that the residents of the Burj Khalifa are lonely, unhappy, or depressed. It would be intellectually dishonest to diagnose the mental health of thousands of people based on the architecture of their building. Many residents absolutely love their homes, precisely because of the control and the peace it offers. But together, these experiences reveal a more unusual possibility. The tower has the capacity to turn an entire city into a collection of views, services, and controlled destinations. Think about the sequence of a resident's life. The car is prepared before they even reach the lobby. The visitors are filtered before they ever reach the elevator. The gym, the pool, and the entertainment are located inside the building. The air is filtered, the temperature is standardized, and the noise is eliminated. Even the most explosive, chaotic celebrations in the city are reduced to a silent movie playing behind thick glass. The resident is suspended in a perfect, climate-controlled environment, floating above the realities of the physical world. They are immune to the traffic, the heat, the tourists, and the unpredictability of the general public. Perhaps the ultimate luxury in the modern world is not height, space, or gold fixtures. Perhaps the ultimate luxury is total insulation from the unpredictable behavior of other people. It is the ability to buy your way out of the social contract of the street, and this insulation can feel incredibly empowering. It can feel like absolute freedom. You are free from annoyance, free from danger, and free from inconvenience. But you have to wonder what happens to the human experience when all friction is removed. Insulation feels like freedom until you begin to wonder whether unpredictability was part of what made the world feel alive. Dubai relies heavily on constant growth and a relentless influx of visitors to sustain its economy. That economic strategy creates a city that is highly profitable but incredibly intense to navigate on a daily basis. The tower allows the ultra-wealthy to own a piece of the city's success without having to endure the physical reality of its crowds. They can profit from the booming economy while remaining completely untouched by its side effects. When a building anticipates every need, filters every guest, and silences every loud noise, it stops being just a residence. It becomes an entire closed-loop ecosystem. We cannot call the Burj Khalifa a prison, because a prison takes away your choices. This building provides nearly every choice that money and technology can theoretically create. For many, the quiet, secure, and incredibly convenient life it offers is the exact definition of success. Not everyone wants or needs the messy reality of street life, but we must recognize the paradox at the heart of this architectural marvel. When your car is always waiting for you, when your guests are heavily vetted before they reach your floor, when your entertainment and fitness are just an elevator ride away, and when the loudest, most chaotic night in the city becomes nothing more than a silent spectacle behind sealed glass. The city outside does not actually disappear. It just changes its function in your life. It ceases to be an unavoidable reality that you must engage with. It becomes entirely optional. You can step into the crowd if you choose, but you never actually have to. The Burj Khalifa gives its residents one of the widest, most spectacular views on planet Earth. But behind that magnificent view, life can become surprisingly small. This video draws on publicly available resident interviews, official architectural information, and broader research on high-rise living. Experiences differ significantly between residents. The video does not claim that all Burj Khalifa residents are lonely, unhappy, or socially isolated. The concept of luxury isolation is used here purely as a social and architectural lens, not as a medical or psychological diagnosis. Economic data reflects the state of the market at the time of research and is subject to change. Would you trade spontaneous street life for complete privacy, security, and convenience? Or is a little noise, inconvenience, and unpredictability the true price of feeling connected to a real city? Share your choice and your reasoning in the comments below. If you value documentaries that look beyond the skyline and investigate how architecture changes human behavior, please subscribe to the channel. The next warning sign is rarely where the brochure tells you to look.